Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 49. Today I'm speaking with Timothy Joe, an artist from Alabama who has been such an inspiration to me. Not only am I inspired by his beauty from the heart and aiming every day to encourage and support others. This episode has a backstory and I want to explain a little of what happened this week because I recorded a long and heartfelt episode with Tim and unfortunately the recording failed, as sometimes happens. It's rare, but it does happen, and it's always so frustrating and disappointing when it does. So then I found the backup recordings and I was elated that the interview was saved. The backup recordings are not as good quality sound-wise, and I can't edit them in the same way as I do normally because the two tracks are already mixed. So you'll hear that there are sounds of dogs barking and other noises which I could normally edit out. But that's not a huge problem. But the problem was that I was happily editing the backup interview, feeling good because it was such a great conversation, and then I realized that the backup recording was only 30 minutes and the interview had been over an hour. I have no idea why the backup only recorded the first half, but I'm not exaggerating when I say that I almost cried when I realized, it's been a roller coaster of a process. So I had a couple of options then. I could redo the whole interview or release the first half now and redo the second half later. I chatted with Tim and he made me smile when he suggested that releasing the first half now and letting it be a cliffhanger to be continued in the future could be fine. I really want to share this first half with you because it's full of warmth and laughter and so beautifully captures the essence of who Tim is as a person and as an artist. I'm very grateful to have had the chance to chat with him, and I know it's going to make you smile. Let's listen. Tim, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So I often start on this podcast by going all the way back and asking people about nature and art in their childhoods. And I wonder if nature and art have been part of your life from the beginning.
It has. I started drawing back when I was 4 years old. My mom would go to the grocery store and get those brown paper bags for her groceries, and she would just fold them up and leave them on the floor for me. And I had my box of crayons there, and that's how I had my fun coloring on the back of those. And we also use them for trash bags. So we throw a trash bag. There goes my art on the trash bag.
No.
So that was fun. I remember having the 64 crayons, the one with the crayon sharpener in the back. That's early childhood. That's back when my brother was going to school, and they didn't have the pre-K thing. So I was at home doing that, entertaining myself. Always loved being outdoors. Always I'm an early riser, so I always wake up early morning and I like going outside. It's just everything's peaceful and quiet and things like that. And I'll go outside and play basketball like around 6 o'clock in the morning just to get outdoors. So yeah, I love them both since early age.
Yeah. And then tell me about how your art developed, because you were then quite an avid artist, right, from teenage years, right? Tell me about that.
Yes, me and my friends growing up, and we was in the fifth, sixth grade. We drew on comic strips or whatever. I was into comics, collecting comic books. Always loved that. Always try to recreate what I saw. X-Men, Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, all those. Um, and fast forward a little bit, I started watching The Joy of Painting with Bob Ross on Alabama Public Television. And that's when I was like, "Whoa, what is this guy doing?" And he's painting all this nature stuff and
Yeah.
mountains and old cabins, and I'm like, I like all that stuff too, even though I don't see any mountains where I live, but I always love it. And of course, you can listen to him talk all day, So that was really what stopped me because I was in eighth grade when I saw that, and I also, I try to play along and paint as he paint, but my mom asked me that Christmas was coming up in a couple of months, she asked me what did I want for Christmas, and I said I want a Bob Ross paint set. They sold them at the
Fantastic.
store, and I just said that's all I want. A couple, of, two canvases, and that I'm good. And so the rest was history after that.
That's just so cool. It's amazing how much of an impact he has had and
Yes,
how many people's lives he changed.
he really did. I don't think he has any idea how many, because it was just him saying that you can do this too. It's so easy. I'm like, okay, and I believe
Yeah.
them. And another thing about art is that back then, they believed that you just have to have the natural talent for you to be good at it. Now I had a natural
Yes.
gift for it, but he really took art that was something on a high shelf that a lot of people couldn't reach and put it down to the level of like anybody. If you desire to paint, if you desire to draw, don't let anybody stop you because folks can get judgmental and say, well, you're not that great. Maybe you should be doing something else. This may not be your gift. But there's something inside of you that want to express that. As little kids and babies, that's all we want to do is just give us something that we mark on the walls. But we're not supposed to, or paper. So that's an artist in all of us. We just stop being one at a certain age.
Yes, absolutely. There's an artist in all of us. Absolutely. I love the way you phrase that because
Hmm.
it's so true. Kids are just doing it naturally, right? And then the
Yes,
inner critic comes in, and maybe need someone in later life to guide us to
exactly.
say, come back here. We can do this. You used to do it, and you can still do it if you want to.
Right. It's always that something that makes you stop doing it. I mean, you start off with that, and if it may be you or someone else, and they may say something about your work, and then it's like you let it go. And I hate to hear that story happen because I was told that was like, well, oh, this artist is better than you, Tim, and that hurt me. But
Yeah.
it's like it's one of those things where when you love something so much, you're not willing to give it up that
Yeah.
easily. So I'm just glad I had that backbone where it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna get better. I'm gonna improve then instead of quitting.
Yes. Amazing. Sometimes I ask people about nature around them, and I'd love to you to describe. So you are in Alabama, and I'd love for you to describe what's nature like when you step outside. I know you have a very special place you go, the Joe Farm. I'd love to
Hmm.
hear about nature outside of your door and also about the Joe Farm.
Okay, well, in my home here in Greensboro, Alabama is very hot and humid in the summertime. So it's like nothing can brace you for it. You just have to go through that trial by fire. But it's beautiful. I mean, early in the morning, you get out there. It's very rural, so it's like you go outside, you can hear the birds singing, you
Mm.
see the squirrels, you see all these things happening, and a lot of the especially people around my neighborhood, they always have gardens. So you have somebody have a garden over here, so they're growing something, planting something. We had plum trees, we got a fig tree. It's just grown so much, it's massive, and we had a garden there too. So and my mother, she is, you know, a flower gardener. I mean,
Mm.
I think both my parents have green thumbs because my dad's a farmer, and then here she is with the flowers, and she planted roses, tulips, irises, all these beautiful flowers. So that's where my love of painting flowers came from her. So nature was
Wow.
all around. Even when I was playing basketball, I mean, you can still hear it all the time. And there's like a woods behind our back of the house, and then you also can see the birds and nesting and all that sort of thing.
Mm. And tell me about the farm.
Okay, this farm, it's 200 acres. Um, I'm a third generation Black Angus farmer. Um, I have very few memories of my granddad back when he was running it, but my dad took it over once him and my grandmother passed away, and it's I mean any type of land you want. It's pastures, deeply wooded area. It has streams, even a pond also. We've raised I think they've raised like 70 to 80 head of cattle out there. And so we have all that. And my dad does hunting, deer hunting. You can do deer hunting, rabbits, squirrels, all that stuff. And it's been unmessed with. And what I mean by that, we don't spray pesticides. So we don't
Mm.
go doing all this extra stuff. It's basically untouched. All we do is if we have our fence and we know where the cattle are going to be, he rotates them around, and it's so gorgeous. Even growing up, we knew we had bird life there, but it became more prevalent now that I started paying attention to that. But it's a beautiful place to be, and we have our birds and nature tours that's hosted there, and we want to invite people from all over who may not even been on a farm to come by. If you want to pet the cow, you could. If you want to feed them, you could do that too, or you just walk around and just enjoy nature.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Because for you, it's completely in your bones to have to be outdoors, to be on the farm. But some people haven't experienced that, and it must be amazing to open up the farm to people who want to experience that side of
It,
life.
it is. It's so funny because like I'm used to seeing this. My dad would have us up there working to death from sun up to sundown. There was no clock system. As long as you had daylight, you could be working. And my mom had to come down there to rescue us because he really be trying to work us to death. But it was I didn't appreciate it as much back then because I'd rather be Saturday morning cartoons were on and he'll drag us out of the house and we'd be out there until like 6:37. But now that I'm older, family, got kids now, it's like this is a really beautiful place. It really is, and then we have people to come to the tours who have never been on a farm, who've been in the city their whole lives, and they look and see the cows, and their eyes are just huge, and they're like, "Oh, look at those cows! They're looking at me." I'm like, "Yeah," and and we'll get some folks who'll say like, I'm wearing red. They're not gonna get angry with me, are they? No, they're not gonna get angry with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Black Angus cows are really gentle cows. They're by nature. They're not really easily triggered by anything. I'll say if you really want to feel safe, get the bull. The bull's like way over like maybe a ton. They're huge. And it's like, but he's so gentle. It's like a huge puppy. But
Yeah.
it's amazing to see how they just like wow. It's so free and quiet. I had one young girl. We had a bird tour 2 years ago, and she was like, "I don't want to leave." She's like, "I really don't want to
Mm,
leave." And I'm like, "Come back and see us." She's like, "Yeah, I know, but it's so peaceful here." And
mm,
and she was having like a kind of rough time, in the city, and just for her to get away and not hear
mm.
anything but nature. I mean, not even traffic. You may get a car going down the road like maybe once every 3 or 4 hours. You might, but yeah, it's a beautiful place.
That's amazing. Oh, wow. So I wanted to talk to you about your subjects. So you do a really wide range of subjects in your art.
Hmm.
But I was reading on your blog, you had a blog post about finding your artistic voice, and you invited
Yes.
people to write down subject matter of all the paintings they'd done in the past 2 years and see what they're naturally drawn to, what they're painting, and that's their natural subject matter. And for you, it was landscapes with man-made structures in them, and you love to paint old rustic things, old farmhouses, abandoned buildings, and I'd love to talk about that, what you're drawn to with this very particular subject matter.
This is a fun one because it took me like 5 years to be able to verbalize what it was, and a lot. And this is for all the artists that's listening to me who feel like I haven't found my artistic voice.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that. It's there is hope, and this is one of the things that I had to do to myself when I was writing my artist statement. What do you like to paint? And I was like, well, I don't know. It's like I paint what I paint, but it's like, but you don't know why you do it. And that exercise was something great where it's like, okay, just get enough mileage for us, like many paintings you make, like you make 50 or 100 paintings. The pattern will be there. You just have to discover it. And so when I put my paintings in a literal pile on the floor, and whatever stacked the tallest was the one that I drawn to. And then I started paying attention to the color schemes. There are certain colors I gravitate towards
Mm,
than others. And I was like, I don't know why, but I just feel good when I use this color. And so it
yeah.
appears more in my artwork. So you have to almost be like a detective where you have to examine your own pattern. They have these shows like CSI or these detectives who get the profile of the person they're after. You really have to do that to yourself. What's Tim's profile? Tim like to hang around old buildings, rural settings. The more rusty it is, the better he likes it. It's like so you
Yeah.
can almost kind of compile like, well, if Tim was in this area, he will show up here, here, and here because he's. And so like they'll totally capture me like that if I was some kind of crook. But it was something that were even as a young kid, I enjoyed something that has history to it. I
Mm,
love stuff that's like mystery, Indiana Jones. The older it is, I got to go find this treasure.
mm.
Growing up, listening to my grandparents speak and talk. I mean, while kids who were my age running around doing other things, I was like, I want to hear what life was like back then. My mom
Wow.
raised chickens. They did all this stuff, And I just found it fascinating. So something about me love history and always want to
Mm.
keep it around. And I like to have keepsakes and memorabilia and things of that nature. So that's when it started to surface. Well, oh, I like stuff that are old and deteriorating because it shows like how time catches up with us all.
Yeah.
What was this old rusted building was once pretty and beautiful and brand new, and the people who were back then with it enjoyed it. But then now it's like no one's there. It's overgrown. It's covered in vines, and it's falling apart. And then you kind of see it, and you just want to me or whatever. I just want to say, you know what? I want to give you your due. For you just still standing here. I want to paint this as kind of like a tribute, in so to speak. So that's my way of keeping history alive.
Yeah, that's amazing. It is almost like honoring an elder, isn't it, when
It
you're
is. That's exactly how I see it. Where it's like you almost kind of walk up on old buildings, like, how you been doing, and that kind of thing. And you know, hopefully the building don't answer back. Was oh, I'm here, my, I'm falling apart. You know, but
my
it's
arthritis.
right. Yeah, it's my hip. That's when you leave. Or you start hearing the building speak, man. That's where you go. But even if it did, even if it did in my case, I probably still hold a conversation with it because it's one of those things. Like my grandmother had lived to be 106 years old before she passed.
Wow.
And for her to still be here that long, it's like, wow, the stuff you've seen, what you went through. I mean, you've been through,
Mm.
the sharecropping, the civil rights movement, the Jim Crow, and,
Yeah.
all the way up to, seeing the things that are happening now. It's like, this is praiseworthy. This is something
Mm-mm.
that needs to become a painting. And it's like, and if no one else would do it, I'm going to do it. And when I found that voice that says, I'm going to paint this no matter if anyone doesn't care about it. I don't care if no one doesn't buy it. I'm going to do this anyway because that's how passionate I am towards it.
I love that so much. It really is about sitting, like, and you said that you were doing that as a child, sitting with elders and listening. And that's
Mm-hmm.
not something that everybody does. It's not something that children often do. But even to sit with an old building and listen in your own way through your art and to try and imagine what the history of that place was, it is giving beautiful respect to that
It
building and that
is.
history.
And that's something that I hope that I can carry over in my art to the younger generation because
Yeah.
growing up as a kid, I didn't act my age. People say like, you're wise beyond your years. I was one of
Yes.
those where at the age of 17, you know, I was thinking about, what I'm gonna do after school and this, that, and the other goals and things, and where everybody's just like, who you taking to prom? And I was like,
Mucking up. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I was like, I don't, and I was just looking like, I don't care, and I was, 16 years old. I was downtown Demopolis at an art festival selling my own artwork at
Wow.
16. So where everybody else was talking about prom and this and where you gonna drive to, I was like, well, I'm gonna go sell some of my artwork, see what happens.
Yeah.
And I remember earning enough money to buy my own first DVD player, and I had these other artists who've been painting and drawing for like 20 years, 30 years, and here I am, this young kid, doing my thing, and they were so helpful. They came by. One of them actually bought one of my paintings. That's like, keep going. Like it was a nice little
Yeah.
encouragement booster, and they impart a lot of wisdom to me. So it's one of those things where now I'm at the position where I can teach
Mm.
it. I just want to keep sharing it. I'm painting like there is no tomorrow.
Yes. Yes. And it's beautiful that you had some mentors do that for you and now you're doing that for others. And you
Mm.
even said about Bob Ross being um, his encouragement told you that you can do this too. That was his main message. And I feel like you are doing that exact thing with your students now. Your teaching style is so warm and so welcoming and encouraging that you do that. You literally do what Bob Ross did for you, which is to say to people, "You can do this. Come on," to be a
Mm.
cheerleader and to
Yeah.
give them that feeling.
Yes, because art's supposed to be something that's supposed to give you joy and make you feel good. And I remember watching an episode of Mr. Rogers, like I say, Alabama Public Television pretty much, raised us where we didn't have cable back then. So we did a lot of educational, nature, art, crafts, and all that kind of thing on that channel. And, his Mr. Rogers, Bob Ross, and there was another artist I need to bring up. He's local, where I came up from. His name was Brian. And it's really cool by him because he's a black man, and so I never had any influence where like a black person is doing the stuff I want to do. So it's like, oh wow, he looks just like me, and as a young kid, that meant something.
Yeah.
But my mom took me to his studio, and he was doing pencil portraits and all that stuff. And it's beautiful. He did this beautiful shack that's nearby where his studio was. And my mom signed me up to take his classes. It was going to start in a little bit, and tragic news. He passed away in a car accident.
Oh dear.
And yeah, and I was so hurt. It was like I'm
Yeah.
about to learn something. I don't need to learn on my own
Yeah.
anymore. And and then when my mom told me news, and I mean I saw his picture in the newspaper when it happened, so like it was not a mistake. It was him,
Mm.
and that thing stuck with me because I felt like I was
Mm.
robbed and cheated of a mentor that I can connect with.
Yes.
And now, as growing up, I always had that in the back of my mind. Like whenever I get to a position where I feel like I arrived and I have the skills to teach it, I'm going to do it with just that much more motivation behind it because I want people to have what I didn't or what I got
Yes.
robbed out of as a teacher. And I saw that as a robbery, but I didn't let it didn't make me bitter. It just made me more determined. Like I want to be kind to people. I want people to love art. I don't want people to feel like they're being pressured, judged. How dare you make that brushstroke? Like you don't harass people. And I just feel like you can learn better when you're having a good time instead of feeling like somebody is really just being a drill sergeant and just grinding you into the dirt. So when I grew up enough to where I was like, okay, I got this. I said to myself, I'm gonna paint that little shack that he drew back then. And two years ago, I actually painted in soft pastels, and of course, it's in the owner's house now because I really wanted to keep it. But I was like, well, okay, I'll give it up. But that's like my little tribute to him and
Tribute.
saying like, yeah,
Mm-mm.
it's like thank you for teaching me, even though you didn't officially,
Yeah.
teach me in class.
Wow, that is an amazing, heartfelt story. Thank you for sharing that. That's a
Oh,
really
no,
powerful story.
no problem.
Yeah, that someone, even after they pass, they can be
They can still
the
teach.
the waves of their presence have have continued inside you. That's amazing.
Yes, and that's something I just like to keep that or whatever. And my personality on its own is like I'd rather not be. I'm not confrontational. I just rather let's just paint. I love teaching. I love learning, and it's like the more I learn, the more it's like I can share this knowledge because I don't want to keep it. Cause you have some artists today who's just like they got an iron grip on their knowledge, and it's like it. And of course, I mean, yes, you should get paid for what you know and all that sort of thing. But it's like it might kill you to spend 5 minutes and say, hey, you know what? If you were to compose it like this and change your value here, it'll pop out at you, and it helps them. I don't see anything wrong with that.
Yeah, I agree. And so you gave us such a wonderful workshop this year for International Nature Journaling
Oh,
Week.
that was fun.
Oh, you did so well. And your style, you just have a real warmth and a welcoming manner and humor, and people just responded to that so well. And it was amazing. You painted a bumblebee and a flower, and it was amazing to watch you and then to see everyone else's bumblebees pop up on
That was
social
the
media.
most fun. To see everyone else is like, oh my gosh, I like that looks. I mean, all of them looked amazing. It was just cool to for them to post like, oh, we was in this workshop and Tim was painting this, and here's my and I was like, that's amazing. And I made sure I went out my way to comment on everyone. If
Yeah.
I missed any, I'll definitely go back and comment because people need that encouragement to say like, you know what, you did an awesome job. Because I didn't know what I was going to paint like a couple of days before. I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to paint. But it's like I. But what I didn't want to do is kind of do what everyone else is doing because we already had a beautiful bird painting done, a Carolina wren, I think. We already had that done, and I was like, well, I don't want to do a bird, but we talk about nature here. Who's the hardest working thing in nature? And I said,
Yeah.
bees, our pollinators, are extremely hard workers. So I'm like, no, I'm gonna give them their dues, and then also have a flower in it too. So I kind of did both of them on the slide.
You did. You did so well in such a short time as well. But what I took away was just the warmth with which you were teaching, and people were just so warm in response in the comments
They
of
were,
the
they
workshop.
were. I had to go back and read the transcript of it. It was like to the point I was like, I got to stop reading before I start crying or something, because it was just that touching. Like, oh wow, he's so he's always happy. You can tell how much fun he's having, and I was like, good. If that's happening and people getting that, then I'm doing my job.
Yeah.
My painting style has come from a lot of trial and error, and there's a lot of you just had to discover what it is because you think I'm the artist, I know what my style is, and you really don't. It's like it finds you more than you find it. So when I started painting and just doing more painting and started doing what felt right to me, but still maintain the rules, but know when to break them. And then it hits me like, oh, I like the quick, loose style of painting. I don't want to be super detailed. I don't want to feel like I worked night and day and labored over it. I wanted to feel as free as I am, and so that's how the art comes off.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that you didn't just land in it. You know that you've worked to find your style, your subjects, and you've done a lot of different media. You've worked in soft pastels and gouache and oil and acrylic, and you've done the work to go through and find what feels good and what
Yes.
feels fun and what you love to do.
Yes, and some artists will say you need to stick to one medium. I'm like, why would I do that? Because I mean, it's like I have way too much fun. And the reason why the medium started, because I started off with acrylics because that's all they had in the stores where I was close to. It was only when I had to travel like 36 miles away from my hometown to get to a Michaels to get an actual oil paint set. That's where the Bob Ross paint set came from. And it's like each medium like it helped me discover a part of myself. Each one, like the oil paints, got me into like okay, the higher way of painting things, and being comfortable because a lot of people are scared of using oil paints, but
Yes.
that's like, but I didn't, and Bob made it so easy, so that took the fear out of it. And then when I branched off to soft pastels, that was the loosen up stage, because when I was painting the Bob Ross style for so long, it became really like formulaic. It came more like a script, and I knew it was time for me to branch off and start doing other things with it. But the pastels really helped me. It almost made me feel like I was a child again on those trash bags drawing, because like there was no boundaries, and to feel the pastel in your hand and the colors all over the place is like the crayon box. And I think that one really transported me back in time to where like I'm having so much fun. I feel like a kid again. And now when I do my oil paints, that same freedom is in there now. And so
Translates back. Oh,
it
that's
translates
wonderful.
back. So it's like one medium broke me into it, but I kept
Mm,
oils. I was trying to be all tight like this. Some of the other painters and artists do. I was trying to be all
yeah.
tight with my art, and then it felt laborious. It felt like it was like I was straining or whatever. It didn't feel fun because I was trying too hard to make it realistic. And then pastel says, "Hey, you ain't gotta be realistic. Be free. Do your thing, man. Paint outside the line or something." And then now my oil paints reflect the style that's in my soft pastels, and now I love them both. But my wife says I'm a better pastel artist than an oil painter. I said, okay. I felt like I disappointed Bob Ross when she said that, but
Oh.
but I can tell, and I had people who say they look at my oil paint and look at my pastels and they say that one looked like you had the most fun on it, and they point at the
Mm,
pastel one.
hmm.
Now I still love
Do,
my oils, but yeah.
yeah, interesting that there's a voice from each one. I'm wondering if certain subjects like to be rendered in certain media. Like, do you prefer
It's
to do
true.
buildings in pastels? I'm wondering about that.
No, that I'm so glad you said it, because it is true. The subject will almost dictate which medium I will use.
Mm, mm,
If it's a floral painting, something like that, I can see myself, especially if it's really colorful, I can see myself running to the pastels to do it.
hmm.
But then it could be something that's more of a muted flower or something like that, something that's maybe sticking out of a vase or on the ground a certain way. I may reach for my oil paints. It really depends. But if I see like an old building or something like that,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go after the gouache, because gouache is much
Okay.
easier to pick up, and I may not do a watercolor as much, because watercolor won't forgive you if you really mess it up.
Yeah.
but I love doing like the natural big landscapes in watercolor, where it's not like too many buildings or sharp edges. It's just like trees, pastures, this, that, and the other. Watercolor can lend itself very good to that. So it really depends on the subject matter. And there are some subject matters where I'll say, okay, I want to paint this in oils and pastels.
Yeah.
And then, so it really is determined by the medium.
That's so interesting, and I wonder how you experience an object or a subject when you're doing the same thing in a different media. It must feel really different, in fact.
Yes. And one thing you have to remember is and I normally don't try to recreate a scene already made, like from, no, I don't try to, because first of all, you're going to get upset because like it didn't look exactly like the first one.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, it's like people. You're not supposed to be. Even twins, you like, they look the same, but like the
Yeah.
personality stuff, like, no, this twin is not supposed to do the exact same thing as this one does. And so if you just keep that in your mind, well, okay, this inspired me to paint this building. I'm gonna come back and paint it again, but I'm gonna use soft pastels this time. But don't pretend like I'm gonna paint it like I'm doing with oil paints, because
Yeah.
that's when you run into trouble. You just have to make it its own person, so to speak. So I try not to duplicate work, but when I'm inspired to do so, you
Yeah.
need to do it. But you can do it a different way.
Yeah.
Maybe use a different color palette or a different medium or something different, and it can take on a life of its own.
Yeah, what just came to mind was Monet, when he had that beautiful garden and he used to go out and paint his garden in different times of day and different
Yes.
lights and that sort of thing.
Yes, the time of day matters. You can paint something at 8:30 in the morning and come back at 4:30. It's the same subject matter, but the way the light
Yeah.
goes, because when the sun comes up, you have much of like a yellow light coming in, and then as it gets to noon, the colors kind of wash out a little bit. But when it gets to those evening hours, you see more orange in your light there, and so what this subject may look like in the morning, it probably look better in the afternoon, or what's in the afternoon may look better because of the sun. So it's like I take all that into account when I'm painting somewhere. I'll walk around and I'll take pictures of the old building. I was like, it looks nice, but I bet you if around 3 o'clock, it'll probably look much nicer or something based on how the light travels. I pay attention to the direction of the sun as it travels across
Yeah.
the sky. And on the farm, I know if I'm gonna do a plein air event, going out painting, I need to be out here in the afternoon, or I need to be here early in the morning,
Because of the light. Ah,
just
so
because of the light.
interesting.
Yes,
And that will change your color mixes and all that stuff as well, I'm
yes,
sure.
yes. It'll shift everything around.
Tell me about color because you're so in tune with color and mixing color, and I'd love to know how you learned all that. Was it just trial and error, experimentation?
It was a lot of trial and error, but I remember when I would watch Bob Ross and he'll be painting, and his color mix is different than like how the fine arts would do it. Because I
Hmm.
know it's kind of sad because Bob is such a caring guy, but you have people from the professional art world be like, "Oh, how dare you! Don't ever say that name around me." And I'm like, "You kidding?" Like Bob had done anything to anybody, but anyway, they'll say he's not a true teacher and this that, and the other. But
Uh,
I was like, you can learn from anybody, and I don't really care about all those titles. But color mixing to me was a lot of trial and error, watch and observe it. But then as I got older, I started reading books on color theory,
hmm.
color temperature, color saturation, the hue, the intensity, the value of it. And when I started learning the importance of value, how light darker color is, because each color has a value sign to it. And this is stuff I'm learning like 6, 7 years ago. So it's
Yeah.
like I painted by instinct, but I didn't know why certain things worked and why certain things did not work. And now I look back, I was like, oh wow, that would have been a better painting if I would have darkened that and lightened this up. But I didn't know any better back then. Like I said, I didn't have a teacher to show me these things, so I had to learn about stuff in trial and error. But color mixing is so fun. I'll do color exercises where I mix my own greens. Take this shade of blue with this shade of yellow, and see what shade of green you get. And whatever shade you get, that may be your background trees, or that may be your trees right in front of you, or that may be the grass. And so it's a lot of fun just playing around with just making your color mixes.
Yeah, in fact, I was the same as you. I was painting for many, many years without any sort of knowledge of color theory, and I would just mix and bit of this, bit of that kind of thing. And sometimes I got it fine, and often I didn't get there. And there was a couple of times that I was like, I really need this dark green or this particular brown for this bark, and I got so frustrated that I was like, I need
Mm-hmm.
to learn the theory. You can come
Uh
in.
huh.
That's a don't.
Just come in and say hi, and then we can go back
Why
to bed.
says don't?
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's okay. It's okay. This is Tim. Do you want to say hi?
Hi.
Hey, hi.
We're doing the podcast. You want to go hang with Dad? I'll be there. So that was my little boy who sometimes finds it hard to wait while I'm podcasting or working at my computer. I didn't edit this section because I thought it was sweet and would show you a little behind the scenes. And creating this episode has been so fraught with technical difficulties, I thought I would be authentic and let it be here, the reality of life. So sorry.
No, don't be. It's like, oh, that's so cute.
He's so funny. He often comes and jumps in. I was doing a meetup on Zoom with some people about clouds, and he just came in, and I was presenting, and he just started going. I was like, okay, and he just wouldn't stop. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna hand it to someone else right now, and then sort this.
That's funny.
What was I saying? Oh yeah, I was like you. I was mixing colors without any idea what I was doing for a while, and then I came up to these points or these subjects, and I just couldn't mix the color. And so I went back and I did what I should have done years ago, which was learn the color theory. And now, once you've done that, once you've done the experimentation, I have a big book that's just for color practice, color play, and and now there's a huge freedom in knowing a little bit of color theory. You don't have to know a lot, but just a little bit can really make a big difference, right?
Yes, and that also will keep you from buying like a million tubes of paint that you probably don't need
Yes.
if you know how to mix it right. Because when you're going out in nature, you don't have that much space in your backpack to put. You can't put like 40 tubes of paint in there, or it's gonna be a short trip. And one of the things that I really had to struggle with is actually making up your color palette. Like, what colors are
Yeah.
you going to use in your color palette? Because there's certain colors you're not going to be able to mix anyway. And I know that a lot of artists say, "Oh, you need is three colors in white, red, blue, and yellow." And I said, "Yeah, but you can't get that shade of that
Yeah.
sky color there because that looks more like a magenta, and you're not going to get that with that primary red you have there or that cadmium red."
Exactly.
So I I had to go through, and my palette is based on a split primary with some earth tones,
Mm-hmm.
a warm and cool of each one of the primaries, so I'll have that, so I know I can mix my greens. But there are these convenience colors I have, like the turquoise and the phthalo
Mm-hmm.
blues and stuff like that, that you cannot mix any kind of way. But I may not have them on my palette, but they're there in case
Yes.
I need them. So it is a lot. It freed me up so much when I learned color theory, where I didn't have to feel like I had to buy every tube of paint to do this. And if
Yes.
I just really understand, like, okay, I see this red here, how do I make it dark in value? And it's like you almost by instinct you start knowing what I need to mix, and then when you made a mistake, like, oh, I knew I should have put that shade of yellow in there. Start over, so you at least know why you did something.
Yes. Ah, so fun. And while we're talking about materials and all that sort of thing, one thing that I noticed right away when I first saw your work was that you have this amazing, unique paper. And I'd
Mm-hmm.
love for you to talk about the paper that
No,
you
yeah,
paint on when you're.
this thing,
Yeah.
yeah, this is well, of course the audience can't see it, but this is and they don't even make those anymore. It's just discontinued. But it's handmade paper. It's very sturdy and thick. I made for like 300 GSMs, I think, and I love the roughness of it. Because when I first started trying to do watercolor, I was doing it on that super smooth,
Smooth.
hot press paper, and it's like, it gets away from you,
Yes.
so, and it's some of the it's when you lay down the color, it's so smooth, and it's almost like you're painting on glass. But like I said, going back to my love of old things, you see
Yeah.
the old manuscripts, the old books that have like that weathered look to it. I love the feel of those. So when I found this book, it was expensive, but it was so worth it because I just love the way the color it kind of gradually goes into the paper. It's not like it's something you can just you have to wait on it to kind of marinate a little bit. And there are times when you paint on it with watercolor, you have to wait for the layers to dry. But with gouache, it's even better because now it's like it takes no time for it to dry, and I could go on and layer all my colors in, and it just comes out looking great. So I just
Yeah.
love. And one thing I do, I tone my paper. I don't unless it's watercolor. Watercolor I leave blank, but if it's
Mm-hmm.
a gouache, I tone it in an earth tone color, and
So you
that's what
lay in
kind
a
of
background first.
yes, I ground the paper first because that kind of makes it more of well, it helps me in my values because white is the lightest value you can get. But if you make a mid-tone, I could judge my values off of better. Like, oh, I need to make a dark value cool color. I'll immediately know if it's dark enough based on that underpainting that's on there.
Mm.
And so that helps keep my it's kind of like a person who's about to sing and they kind of blow into the little thing and they get their little tune and key right or whatever.
Oh
It's kind of
yeah.
like doing that
Pitch.
with
Yeah.
art. Yeah,
Yeah.
so they
Yeah.
find the right
Mm.
pitch. So
Mm-mm.
so when I'm
I
doing
like that.
this, I'll have a painting where it's like, okay, this is gonna be a relatively dark painting. So I need to key myself into knowing, what values I need to be going because I paint from dark to light. So once I started doing that and working on this paper, it works like a dream. And I like to paint to where you can still see the underpainting showing through it. I don't cover the whole surface or whatever because I like to see those little bits and pieces of that earth tone showing up in the painting.
That's amazing. And when you just said dark to light, I'm so fascinated by people like you who can do gouache and oil and also watercolor, because in watercolor you have to switch the brain and you have to
Yes.
start light to dark. And I'm wondering how you go about that switch. And I think I talked to you about this in your workshop in International Nature Journaling Week, but I'd love for you to explain that for people on the podcast. This mental switch you have to do when you're switching between those two styles of
Oh,
painting.
sure. And I still don't consider myself a master at it because I hadn't painted watercolors in a while. So I may go to watercolors and totally wreck it because I've been doing gouache for so long. But you really do have to come to switch because I've been doing oils first, and oils they say you go with dark to light. It helps, and because you keep your colors clean. And soft pastels, same thing, dark to light. Because if you go in reverse on oils, or you go muddy up your highlights, your light violet colors gonna get muddy up by the darks. And so if you have a sky that has a beautiful yellow, light across it, you don't want to run across that yellow with anything else that may dull it down.
So there's the cliffhanger. I hope you enjoyed this first half of the conversation with Tim. I promise that we will re-record the second half and get it out as a future episode very soon. I love how connected Tim is with the past, and that through his art he is honouring and respecting the history around him, of the buildings, of nature, and of the people who lived in this landscape. What I want you to do now is to go to the show notes of this episode, where you'll find links to Tim's website and social media pages. Follow him on Instagram and take a look at his artwork online. You can buy beautiful original pieces, and I know he's just created a series of bookmarks for sale featuring birds of his region. He also does online workshops which you can sign up to. It makes such a huge difference to artists and creators when you show support in this way. I'm still smiling from this interview, and I hope you are too. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.